Would we want to live in a matriarchy and why?
Or why not? I'm just going to say I should never lead a matriarchy. It wouldn't be good. But I could be a good right-hand person or somewhere in the cabinet, I think.
Yeah.
I think I could be in the
For
cabinet.
me, I'd probably just get tired at certain points. I'd be like, guys, I'm done. Like, I don't know what it is you need from me right now, but you need to figure it the fuck out. I'm off. And when I come back, please come with some solutions.
That's the thing. You see, you would say come back with solutions, whereas I'd think I had to be in everything and read every piece of literature. You'd just be like, I have minions. Let me rest. I am an introvert.
Yeah.
Somebody went round asking a bunch of women, would you live in a world that had only your
Gender.
Gender, right?
Sex, yeah.
Women who were asked were like, absolutely, I would live in a world with just women. If there were no men on the planet, it wouldn't bother me. And then they asked men, would you live in a world with just men? And they were like, hell no. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and Flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and Flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and Flow. Rigour and Flow.
Welcome to Rigour and Flow with me, Aiwan.
And me, Tamanda, the show where business meets love.
And culture meets critique. I'm really excited about today's episode because it essentially centers women. The whole thing is about women. And it's not just about women in some sort of like mushy way or, you know, platitudes or, you know, save the women.
How wonderful we all are.
Yeah. It's asking some really deep questions. It's flipping the script in a number of ways, thinking about the structure of society. And essentially, today's episode asks and attempts to answer the question, would we want to live in a matriarchy and why?
Or why not?
Or why not? Exactly. So I guess we should probably kick off with
the starting point for the entire episode.
Precisely, like where did this idea even come from and why were we asking ourselves this question?
Exactly, which was that we were recently watching the Amazon Prime series, The Power.
Yes.
Which I hadn't realised until we started talking about this episode was actually a book, right? And you said you'd read it.
I had a few years back, I read the book.
Okay, and the author was Naomi
Alderman.
Yeah. That's the right.
Yeah.
So was the premise of the book similar to the TV series? And did you have like a preference?
Yeah, I would say that the series definitely stayed quite faithful to the book. But books being books, they have more detail and sort of more nuance and more texture and layering that you can't really do in a TV series, right? So for me, the book, and this is usually the case with all adaptations, I generally tend to find the book better than the TV series. But they did do the TV series quite well, I have to say.
I mean, I came to it cold and I had no idea, as I said. And I really loved it as a concept and what the whole thing was about, which, do you want to explain what that was?
Yeah, so essentially we're in a world where young girls in their teen years, as they come into their puberty, a part of their neck, I think they called it, was it a skein or a skein?
Skein, something. Some organ that they exclusively developed as teenage girls.
Exactly. It's spelled SKEIN. And it's some new organ that appears or activates when they become teenagers and gives them powers, essentially.
It almost feels like a rite of passage that young girls get, right? It's the age they are when they're getting it, it feels like teenager hormones is like this rite of passage into this newfound power of this organ that does these crazy things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And with this power, they're able to shock and kill people. And what we discover as the series goes on is that they're able to activate that skein or whatever you want to call it in older women.
That's correct. Yes, because it starts getting passed on from daughters to mums, and
aunties,
it's basically
emits
like an electrical. Is it like a shock or
like
a signal
or
charge or something?
And they're able to do things with it, not just maim and kill, but they're able to also manipulate things as well and electrify things and give power to things as well.
Yeah.
And amazing. Of course, as the series unfolds, and we're not going to give too many spoilers, but essentially it disrupts the patriarchal hierarchy that exists in the majority of those societies. So we see the Middle East, things unfolding in the Middle East, in Europe, in Africa, and so on and so forth.
It's really a global story.
It is a global story.
And what you see is this reckoning of every aspect of society having to deal with women and girls having power. So there's storylines that look at policy and government through the lens of this one family where the woman is a politician, right? Yeah. I can't remember, is she the prime minister? Or she's just vying for...
I think she's a governor. She's about to be governor, or she is the governor in an American...
state. Margot, her name is, and she has a young teenage daughter.
Yeah.
And so through that family, you see how do the men in the family respond to their teenage daughter suddenly having power and this strong woman politician having to navigate a world waking up to girls' power. And
especially
so you see,
when she has come with a feminist lens.
Yes.
And now women have power. How are you going to protect men? And how are you going to... Do you see what I mean?
It was a really tricky, wild storyline because you watched her husband sort of wanting to hold up the woman, but playing all these roles we've seen women play for centuries to uphold her, not to get in the way of her ego or her centrality or, just her power, essentially. And then he has a son who's also a teenager. And although she's a feminist, he starts to get really kind of incel, red pillish about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you can see her going like, how did I raise a son that's into incel shit when I'm a feminist and I'm trying to figure out how to manage this crisis? So it just like flips everything on its head, right?
Yeah, and he's getting into the incel stuff because of this new female power. And so the equivalent of the character in the film is like kind of, I would say, analogous to Andrew Tate. Is what I would describe it, right?
Yeah.
And so that guy, the Andrew Tate guy in the series, is basically saying, this is what happens. Women just want to kill you. They just want to destroy you. They want to do all of it. They want to
dominate men.
They want to dominate men,
yeah.
all of that stuff. And obviously he finds appeal in that because I think he was shocked by his sister, when her...
Oh, yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I'd forgotten that there was an accidental thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were fighting over the remote.
Yes. Yeah.
And in her elevated state, she released the power from her skein and
it impacted
him and burnt him.
Yeah.
And then that's when he started down the slippery slope of getting into this Andrew Tate type figure.
Exactly, yeah. So you have that sort of storyline, which is like the political and the family ramifications. And then you have this young woman, the black woman, who kind of is the first story we see, who's in care and traumatized, and a sort of spiritual community forms around her and all the power she has.
Yeah, because she's sent to a home for troubled girls, I think.
Yeah, I think she's also trying to escape someone. Remember, there's a scene at the beginning where she's on the road without giving too much away.
Yeah.
And so she finds refuge in a nun's home and then becomes a sort of central figure around which people orbit when they realize she has this power, and it takes on this real religious dimension. So you see politics, religion, then you have this kind of street level faction. Do you remember that? I think she's like a lesbian.
Yes.
Is she lesbian?
She's giving
dyke vibes. Roxy or something.
Yeah.
And that storyline I thought was really cool because she was...
so you're kind of dealing with kind of like a working class girl from a criminal family, essentially. And so she's navigating being the daughter that she's the youngest child. She's got older brothers. Her father runs this criminal enterprise. He takes the boys seriously as the muscle and the this and the that. And she's like, why won't you take me seriously? And then her thing activates, her skein activates, essentially.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the father sees, it's like, okay, this could be useful in the criminal enterprise. So we also see status, we see class, we see gender dynamics in a family and her navigating that. And then we also have the Middle East with I think a lot of them were hijabi women.
Yes, yeah.
Uprising.
A lot of Muslim women doing an uprising. Now they had this power.
Yeah.
And then state security and forces responding to this well, actually it was global uprising of women by the end, and how the machinery of the state, which had been a patriarchal thing, responds to this. You know, basically women were fucking shit up, like they were literally
left, right, and center.
That is the premise.
It was
of
just
the
zap,
thing,
zap, zap. You get zapped. You get zapped. You get zapped.
Right.
Everybody zapped.
Yeah, exactly.
Even the street light is going to get zapped. Everything is getting zapped.
There we go. So basically, in watching that, we came to this kind of whole discussion of like, okay, is this actually what a matriarchy is? What is a matriarchy? Do they even exist? Because that's actually like a very massive, contentious and quite controversial debate in anthropology and in various social sciences. Like, is the matriarchy even a thing beyond theory, right? Or fantasy, as we saw depicted in that show, right? Like an idea. And if there is a matriarchy, would we want to live in it? So I'm asking you that question. Like,
would I want to live in a matriarchy?
Or what do you think a matriarchy is?
Well, a matriarchy, to my mind, is a society that is governed by women. It's almost the opposite of patriarchy.
Okay.
So most of us live in patriarchy. So that means the rules are made predominantly by men. Things are made predominantly for men, and with them as the primary target audience for things. Like when I think about inventions and I think do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Men are paid more, their healthcare is prioritized, research into them is prioritized, laws are made by them, laws are enforced by them, laws are judged by them. Like it's basically a society where the man is the head.
Yeah. It's really
so
about power and authority, I guess. Right?
Precisely, It's also about the mechanisms of society and what they prioritize. And the bottom line is, when I look at even your field, so you work in the area of maternal health, and I know that there is a lack of research into women's maternal health because we're in a patriarchal system.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, right? Because it's one thing to talk about, power and authority governs who makes decisions and how things are dealt with. But there's also something that comes with that, which is this point you're making about is how much men are centered.
Yes.
Like subconsciously, which is kind of a cultural issue. And I suppose it's deeply interrelated to with who holds power and authority to make decisions, right? Yeah, okay. So for you, a matriarchy is a system in which it kind of is like the power. There's a bit of a reversal in that women hold positions of power and authority that were traditionally held by men. And there's a level of dominance.
Yeah, and predominantly. So it's not just women are in power, because there are nations in the world where 40%, 50% of the Senate or the Congress or whatever is women, but they're still patriarchal countries.
Yeah.
So it's about predominant.
Yeah, exactly. Who has the power to control or dominate a certain way of doing things.
Yeah, and who's prioritized.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is that something you would want to live in?
You know, it's a really tricky one, because when I think about patriarchy and I think about matriarchy, in my mind being the opposite of that, the direct opposite of that, for me, it would really depend, because I have seen the violence and chaos that women can unleash, just like men, honestly.
People can just unleash.
Well, human beings.
Yeah.
So human nature is maybe what I should say, but we're talking specifically about women, right? So I have to locate it there. I think, as with all things, it depends on who's in charge. However, what I do like about a matriarchy is that for the first time in a matriarchy, I would be priority.
Ooh.
And my needs would be priority. And I won't be paying for dumb shit. You know, like, for example, I think about the period tax. You know, the fact that this is a biological function that all women have, and yet we have to pay for our sanitary products, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, men can get condoms for free. You know, you can actually just get them for free. You could go to a health clinic and just get it for free.
Yeah.
There's nowhere really I can go. I know things are changing slightly and I see more and more period products in toilets, but it's not universal.
No.
And then I think about the amount of deaths in maternal care that would be averted because we'd be prioritised.
Yeah.
I think about all the things we've been through over the last few years and how that would be prioritised.
Yeah.
I think about just the gender pay gap and how that would be adjusted overnight, because women ain't going to take that shit really and truly if it's dominated by us and for us. There's so many things that I think would be a really beautiful thing to experience that privilege for a moment in a matriarchy.
That is so interesting. And do you know what even as you're saying that, one of the struggles I was having in thinking about this topic was, it's really a crisis of imagination, right? In how do you imagine a matriarchy without direct reference to patriarchy? And that was what the fascinating thing about the power was. It's like there are many assumptions I had about what a matriarchy is or could be before watching The Power, and they didn't look like a direct reversal or a dominance of women or us having power and authority. They looked what I've now understood to be more matristic, which is like women and the principles that you will often see assigned to women govern how a society is run. So you can have both more like the Swedish culture, right? You can have men and women and there's authority, but there's more focus on things like cooperation. I'm not saying those are essentialized things that only women can have, but it's been more based, it's less based on dominance and more about cooperation or building communal ways of living or implementing all of these values. But in a purest sense, a matriarchy is a complete reversal, the kind you're describing. And even as you said, that thing of like, oh, we wouldn't pay the period tax. I've literally never imagined that for myself. The fact that myself and a good proportion of women are in pain once a month for 4 days a month, that we can go grow tumours and still be told like, yeah, we don't really know what causes that. Meh. Those things would not exist. Never mind the privilege. Yeah. All I'm asking about is an absence of normalized harm.
Yeah.
So what would the actual privilege look like?
Exactly.
That's even a different question.
I know. And there would be privilege, honestly.
Of course there would.
Because you would prioritize that. I just think about a man saying, oh, we don't know anything about that. And then it's the same man who will turn around and talk about, science is the way and it teaches us all the things we need to know. But you can't work out what a fibroid is.
Yeah, because it doesn't affect your life.
What is a bloody fibroid, mate? Do you know what I mean? But you can tell me about the Hubble telescope, how many stars are in the galaxy, dark matter, vacuums, psychoacoustics.
And vacuums only so you can get us to do your labour for longer and easier.
Well, I was thinking about the vacuums in space. But,
oh, sorry.
That you have been, your brain
My brain has been infiltrated. That's what I mean. It's a crisis of imagination.
This is what I'm saying. So you can tell me all this stuff, but if I ask you what is endometriosis, you say, I don't know what is endometriosis, but I'm going to give you a surgery. So you're doing surgery on something you don't know. Wow. We have all been bamboozled by the patriarchy. We have been thoroughly bamboozled.
We actually have. Do you know what, though? As we were talking about this, I'm realising that I recently had this experience of understanding a kind of male privilege.
Okay, go on.
In not the kind that's let's solve the problems we face that they don't see, but like I'm actually on top, and I like how this feels, right? I'm really benefiting from feeling on top, right? It's a small thing, but every year, at the beginning of the year, I like to go away on a retreat, as you know.
Oh, yes.
And I, in the last few years, have been going on a women's writing retreat for academic women. Mm-hmm. Shout out Katie, who set up the Women in Academia Support Network writing group. And I went in January of this year. And one thing I've noticed is that when we go on this retreat, we stay in this house that we Airbnb. There's usually about 5, 6, maybe 7 of us. Mm-hmm. And everything works like clockwork. right? It somehow manages to be a week in which you go and you work and you contribute to making dinner and cleaning, but your load feels infinitely lighter. And it's because there are 7 people that all seem to sort of pitch in and take turns doing cooking and take turns doing cleaning. And so you reduce your load to a fraction. And what often happens, I hope I'm not going to expose anyone, is that people will come and comment on how different it feels from their home lives. And most of the women are either heterosexual or in arrangements that look more conventional and traditional. And so when I was away on the retreat this January, I was sitting there in my room thinking, fuck, we've got fewer days this year than we normally do our retreat. So I could kind of get away with not cooking at all. And I was like, wow. And then I remember this question being asked around the dinner table on night 1, like, who wants to cook or who's good at what? And I just kept my mouth shut because I was like, I don't want to volunteer myself to cook, right? And then I went back upstairs and I was like, is this what weaponized incompetence feels like? Is this what guys do all the time, where it's like, there's time to cook and it's like, oh, but you're so good at cooking. Yeah. Or I'm just not going to volunteer and say I'm good at this thing, because if I say I'm good at this thing, I'll end up having to do this thing. And then I was sitting there in my bed that night after we'd had that conversation and I hadn't volunteered myself to cook. And I was thinking, God, I feel terrible. This week is feeling so easy. And then I was like, but whose expense is this coming at? Because I know I've lived in heterosexual arrangements where at some point I've got to the point where, like, I am working so bloody hard to cook, to order food, to do this, to do that. And they just get to turn up at the table and everything seems to have happened by magic. And then I was like, oh, this is what it feels to be a man. And then I started to feel really bad and I thought, I'm not going to bring it up with anyone. And I couldn't help myself because I felt so bad. The next night I went around the table and I said to the women, I was having this thought, like, this week feels so easy and I'm wondering whose expense that comes at, because I know Katie organises it. She does all the shopping. So that labour is not invisible to me, but everything else is. And all of them said, no, actually, it feels the same for me. I feel like I'm not lifting a finger relative to what I normally do. And then this started this whole conversation. And I was like, that felt like a privilege.
It's super interesting. So basically in that moment, you felt the power.
I felt the power, but I didn't know if it was everybody feeling the power or I was benefiting at someone's expense. For full disclosure, I did cook my meal, or rather at least reheat a meal that someone cooked and prepare it. And I obviously did all my fair share of cleaning, but I couldn't even exist in the power without questioning it because I'm socialized not to. I mean, I believe that the way I felt that week is how a lot of men feel most days.
Yeah, but they don't even realize it.
Yeah. Or they do, but they keep their mouth shut.
It's interesting, though, in the example you gave, you've got a group of women together in a space, but for me, it doesn't feel like a matriarchy. It feels more like cooperating.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It just happens to be cooperation amongst all women.
Yeah.
I would be interested if, in that same example, if one of them was the designated leader.
Yeah.
And how would that change things? And then if there were other groups like that with their own leaders dotted around that same space or in that location with their own heads of whatever, society, group, whatever it is, how would that change? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, when I think about matriarchy versus patriarchy, I am thinking of it as like control and dominance and rule and power and hierarchy, right? Because that's what kind of patriarchy has given. And so matriarchy is the opposite of that, but with women. Yeah. So I'm like, what other examples?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think it gets to the heart of some of the debates that you see even amongst researchers. Like, was there a leader in that group? In a way, I would say, if there's a leader, which I think there is, it's Katie, but that leadership is freely given to her. And it's given to her because she's the person who organises and convenes. And what she's created is a culture where everyone cooperates and does things and pitches in, and the people around are like kind of unconsciously signing up to that.
Okay.
I don't know how that would work out if you suddenly try to apply that to like, that's just a theoretical idea. I mean, I think there are people in societies who've tried to do that, but I think there are also loads of examples around the globe. Like even in the run up to this, I think you sent me an example of a Kenyan documentary on Vice, which looked much more like a model of domination.
Yes, it was the Samburu, the women from the Samburu tribe, because of like years of basically just wanton abuse and violence and
patriarchal, like FGM, sexual violence, all sorts of things going on.
Domestic violence, being chased out of their homes, husbands taking whoever wives they want, being able to kill them with impunity. So the husbands can kill a wife and it's seen as nothing because she's seen as property. And so these women, one woman in particular, I think she's called Rebecca, she left her village and formed a women-only village.
Called Umoja, right?
Called Umoja, which means unity. And she formed this village and any woman can come there, and a lot of women did and still do flee to that village in varying states of distress. And they formed this community and literally no men allowed.
Yeah. I mean, I think don't they have liaisons and dalliances sometimes with men outside?
Yes, they do.
And then, but they've formed their own economic thing as well, haven't they?
They sell their jewelry, they raise money, the money goes into building houses, repairing things, creating schools, that sort of thing. So they've literally created, in essence, a matriarchy because Rebecca is the head of it.
That's true. The only thing I would say, and I think this is why people argue, is that they've created a matriarchy, but even if you listen to their story, there's men challenging them because now they have their own economic power and they have to have women looking after security at night when they sleep and looking out over this little matriarchal society. But it's basically because it exists in a patriarchy. I think that's why people are like, there is no matriarchy, because even that is a resistance to patriarchy, right?
Yeah. And if they were to get real power, i.e. their numbers were to surge and they would have real money, or God forbid, and I say God forbid, they discover some rare minerals or gold or oil on their land.
Yeah.
That shit's getting blown up.
Do you know what I mean?
It's like, thank you, we're taking your stuff.
Precisely, and you can see it. I mean, even some of the men that appear in this documentary are like, my wife ran away and came here, and in the traditional way that she would have gone to the elders and she would not be allowed to leave. And they're angry, and you can see why they're trying to attack. Now imagine resources are attached.
It's not happening.
It would be, I mean, there was even
men who have countries that have resources can't hold their resources from other men.
Yeah.
Look what Trump is doing now.
Yeah.
Venezuela, oil.
Yeah.
He captured the president and put him in chains and said it's because of drugs.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's not. It's because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on the planet.
Exactly.
So when I mentioned the Umoja village, you actually mentioned that it actually exists in a patriarchal context. So then my question was, that's interesting. Is it then still a matriarchy?
Well, I think that question is a really good one, because I think it cuts to the heart of like a lot of the debates that you see in the literature about whether a matriarchy actually exists. And most people, like a lot of anthropologists, will be like, a matriarchy doesn't exist. And then others are like, no, they do exist, but what kind of matriarchy and what kinds of things define a matriarchy? So like in the strictest sense, a matriarchy is defined as a society where women have power and authority. And then there's like another term, like a gynarchy. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I have heard the term gynarchy, yeah.
But that is like the most extreme, essentially the most extreme version of that, because that kind of a society is defined or characterized by the dominance of women. So it does end up looking like what you talked about in the power, or maybe you could say with Kenya to some extent, there's that woman, there's Rebecca, she kind of seems to lead this village and everything happens. And you could say, okay, that is a matriarchy, but I just don't believe you can call it a matriarchy, because the fact that there are all these men trying to come back and steal their wives, or the fact that they need a security system to fight off men, or that it even exists as a response to gender-based violence, FGM, shows that it clearly exists inside of a patriarchy.
But even in a patriarchy, men have to fight off other men from taking their stuff and taking their women and taking their children. like wars.
yeah, from taking their women and their children as property. So it's a kind of starting point for it. It's like...
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
Yeah,
the bottom line is
yeah.
the Kenya example could fit, lots of different things.
Stuff. Yeah,
and that's what people argue over,
Yeah.
right? People say, well, matriarchy exists as this thing theoretically and in fantasy where women dominate. And at some level, you could say that's what's going on with this Umoja place in Kenya. But then you also have societies that are like matrifocal, where essentially the organization of everyday life happens around women and their community and what they want. They make jewelry, they sell it, they organize schooling. Mm-hmm. Everything is happening around the needs of women. And if you look at lots of the research, there are examples of communities like that across the globe. Like in Southwest China, there's apparently this Mosuo community, which is matrifocal. Everything is organized around maternal households. There's no formal marriage system. There's another one in Costa Rica, which I thought was super interesting, called, the people are called the Bribri, I believe. Mm-hmm. And that's even more interesting in that women, it's an indigenous society where women own lands, they have a clan, and there's a cosmology or a spiritual belief system that elevates women and women's care rather than coercion. Those feel quite different to what you're seeing in the Kenya example to me, in that there seems to be an acceptance of the kind of almost divine quality or nature of women or women-led societies, or a centering of it. Mm-hmm. Whereas for me, the one in Kenya feels like an overt resistance to patriarchy. Do you see what I'm saying?
So it's there in direct opposition to patriarchy, whereas the Costa Rican one, the Bribri, exist alongside it. They're not opposing it.
It almost feels like that's the way that society has always been, the worldview. Like their spiritual cosmology is something that centers women, and specifically elder women. Okay. And their whole theologies or cosmologies relate to that. So even the men in those societies, they're there, but they're kind of peripheral. Mm-hmm. They're not like, it doesn't mean that when I say peripheral, that makes it seem like they're lesser than, but it just means that there's a certain reverence for women. Mm-hmm. Whereas in patriarchy, women have often been oppressed and dominated. I imagine in that context, I don't know enough about the community, but I imagine under modernity, which is like very patriarchal, I don't know how that plays out in like a modern Costa Rica, mm-hmm. and where that particular group of people are situated. I'd have to look into it, but it seems like the worldview starts with that level of teaching about the place of women, which is a very different starting point to Kenya, the Umoja people in Kenya, for example,
which is definitely a resistance to oppression, and finding safety amongst your own. It kind of makes me think a little bit about matrilineal societies. When we were doing Hidden Histories for Audible, the podcast series which we produced, in episode 1, we talked about Queen Nanny of the Maroons.
Yeah, brilliant episode.
I loved going out there. And we spent some time in the Blue Mountains with Queen Nanny's Maroon community, the community that she founded with her brothers. And it was so interesting because a lot of the Maroons, well, that community definitely in particular, are descended from the Akan. So during the transatlantic slave trade, slaves were taken from the coasts of West Africa, and Ghana being one of those coasts, right? And so the people that were taken, some of them were Akan, and the people that were taken to the Caribbean, specifically this Maroon community, a lot of them were descended from the Akan people of Ghana.
Was that in the episode?
Yeah, we talked about that.
I mean, I've listened to it and I don't remember making that connection, but that's fascinating.
And we talked about the language and how there are certain words that are still used that come from the Akan language and so on and so forth, right? Obviously, they're also mixed with the indigenous Indian communities, the Taino people as well. What was so interesting to me as we were researching was that the Akan people are a matrilineal people.
So this is very interesting. If you're matrilineal, I'm assuming that means that a lot of things that get passed down, whether it's land or rights or name, run through the mother's line.
So with the Akan people, essentially what happens is the sister of the king is the one who gives birth to the new ruler. And so the royal bloodline runs through women.
But does that mean women are in charge? If you have a village or a tribal system and there are decisions to be made in that village, so power and authority, it's men who hold it. So I think I've mentioned we have a kotla system where local chiefs will convene the people to discuss civil matters. It's still always done through men. And if you're a woman and you go there, in general, you have to turn up in a dress or a skirt. I always remember if I was going to go, I would have to go and like find a skirt or a dress, right? Not that I've been many times, but it's still, you can have a matrilineal society essentially, but still have patriarchy.
Right, because I guess in that case, the ruler is still a king.
Exactly.
The person governing.
The power and the authority
still
lies
comes,
with men.
But because he would have been given birth to by the sister of the previous king, he would have some allegiance to the woman because that's his relative. So I wonder if that
changes how people rule.
Yeah, how they rule and what they prioritize and who's in their ear talking. I don't know.
It is interesting because I can think off the top of my head, just on the examples I gave, of examples where that is the case and men still wield a ridiculous amount of power and authority.
It's true. When that testosterone kicks in, he gonna do what he gonna do.
Yeah, it's a nice idea that because the women are important to the birthing, but it still fits men's aims. It's still to instill their power.
Yeah.
So I imagine it comes down to the context of each ruler.
Yeah,
I mean,
think so.
In Queen Nanny's case, did you have a sense of whether there was a patriarchy? Was she like very much in charge? Or...
Oh, she was very much in charge. She
was it a matriarchy?
She was the ruler of the Maroons and she led them into battle and she did all the things that a ruler is supposed to do, which is to protect, to provide, to nurture, to, pastoral stuff. She was Queen Nanny of the Maroons.
So that's super interesting because it sounds like what you have there is both a matrilineal society inherited from the Akan and then a matriarchy led by Queen Nanny. Sounds like both things are happening.
Now, the only thing I don't have is I don't know to what extent they maintain that matrilineal society. Because Queen Nanny ruled... But actually, if we look at the Akan matrilineal, the women don't rule.
Yes.
So
that's the point I'm making. That Queen Nanny both ruled and, in other words, led a matriarchy.
Yes.
And you don't know.
Comes
so
from
what you're
a
saying,
matrilineal,
Yeah, okay. But
you
don't know if they continued that matrilineal thing.
I don't know
her.
if they did.
So it could be that
because
she
actually
ended up...
we struggled to find any other female leaders beyond, I think there was the one woman who had led the Maroons. I can't remember what happened, but we weren't able to talk to her. I don't know if she passed or if she wasn't available, but something. But they hadn't had another ruler, female ruler, since Queen Nanny.
That's
in that community. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky.
Okay.
And I'd need to do a lot more research, but because that wasn't the focus of the series, it was more a thing that popped up in our research. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
No, I was going to say, it's fascinating, even in the context of this thing, that someone's so powerful.
Yeah.
Who built a matriarchy, and it doesn't sound like it was sustained. If you can't find any further female rulers, what happened?
Yeah. And when you say she built a matriarchy, I don't even know if we can say that in the sense that it was still a society where men and women were together. Men weren't peripheral. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so they had positions of power and authority.
They had positions of power.
Her.
She had her generals or whoever, do you know what I mean? Going into battle, who were fighting and stuff like that. It's just that she was the leader and she empowered women to also do the things that the men would do,
So maybe, in fact, it's more like what tends to get said of, say, Scandinavian countries like Sweden, which is that it's matristic, that you might have women in positions of power is shared, but you have women in positions of authority.
Yes.
And it just happened to be that she was a woman leader and ruler of that time.
Precisely.
But you've actually got more equity happening across society in general.
Exactly.
Or for that particular society.
Yeah, and that particular period for that society. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I guess we've talked about, just to kind of summarize it, we've got a matriarchy, which is
a situation in which women hold authority and power.
And then we've got a gynarchy, or a gyneocracy.
Very similar. I can't say that word. Very similar to a matriarchy in which, women almost hold dominance, essentially.
Yeah. So it's about
over
power
men.
and
It's more about power. Yeah, it's a more extreme version.
And then we've got matristic.
which is where there's more equal sort of power sharing, and that women's ways of being in authority shape society alongside men's.
And then we've got a matrilineal,
which is
more
where
bloodline.
Kinship, bloodline rights move through the woman. But you also have matrifocal.
And then matrifocal. Yeah. So what's matrifocal?
Matrifocal is where you often see women being centered within the organizing of a society. So there might be more communal, things are centered around women's work or more communal ways of organizing society. It's very, very confusing.
So in a way, your retreat was matrifocal.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
I would say it's matrifocal. And yet it's not that men just weren't there,
but
also all of us organised it around our work, our lives, our way of our needs, essentially.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So when we think about the UK, which is actually quite ahead when it comes to women in power, we've had 3 female prime ministers.
Depends how you define ahead, but okay.
Well, just by, I'm just going, in a patriarchal world, having a country that's quite, it's quite a big country on the global stage, having 3 female prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher.
One of them lasting for about 2 seconds.
Yeah, literally. Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May, and Liz Truss, who literally lasted, I think she was the shortest reigning prime minister in the history of British politics, right? But we've had 3 of them. They've all been from the Conservative Party.
Which is very important to this topic.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
But, so we've had, and then all 3 of them, I think maybe not Truss, but certainly Theresa May and Margaret Thatcher ruled under a Queen Elizabeth
That's
II.
True. Yeah.
So we had, our head of state was a woman.
I think even Liz Truss was.
I think so,
right?
So, yeah. And then, so we've got a female head of state and we've got a prime minister who's a woman. What are we saying about the UK?
Absolutely not a matriarchy. Because, I mean, God, where do we start with this? First of all, as you rightly pointed out, all come out of the Conservative Party. The word being conservative, its foundations and the foundations of the whole land, actually conservative or not, have been patriarchal. And they still remain patriarchal. Also, look at their cabinets and tell me any of them are epitomizing women's liberation.
No.
I mean, even if you had them with like equal in terms of how gender is represented, where do you see a story of female liberation? Or, look at the system and who makes decisions. Power and authority still lies in the hands of men or is built on the legacies of systems defined by men. So
and there's not a lot you can do as a prime minister, a female prime minister, if all of your cabinet are men.
And all the history of everything that you're operating with that makes structures the institutions you run is that. So it would require something totally different, First of all, there's a question of whether we would want the matriarchy as in a complete subversion, but even to create something more matristic, like we talked about the Scandinavian examples, you'd actually need a different politics to be embodied by some of those women leaders. And most of them were not offering a different politics. In order to get into a position of power, they had to prove themselves a safe pair of hands, often doing things that made people think they weren't weak. Hence, we have Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher. Can she take a hard decision and can she show she can do things that men can do or whatever else, right? Because there's this whole set of ways that authority is coded by ideas of what is masculine and what is strong and deemed strong leadership. So we can say we don't even have a system that would know how to deal with a different type of leadership from women at this point.
That's interesting.
I would say.
Yeah, and I have to say I agree with you on that. Because very often when women get into power, I've seen it in my industry, they get into positions of power, senior exec this, vice president this, and it's like they want to prove that they're not a woman in that sense, in that derogatory sense of the term. And that they, like you say, they can move like men and they can make difficult decisions like men and they can lay people off and they can govern like this or whatever. And they end up making some really draconian decisions that
and
don't
even
benefit the most disadvantaged for a start.
So thinking about spaces governed by women or where women are centered, when you look back on your life, what kinds of women-only spaces have you been in, and have you felt them to be distinctive or different in any way from what we see in organisations?
Yeah, I would say I'd have to go back to the church, as always. My mum was a women's leader. And so every Sunday and sometimes during the week, we would have something called a house fellowship. And house fellowships were like little cells that met up in your local environment, separate from the church.
Cells, wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like...
Well, it's the body of Christ, right?
Okay.
The body of Christ.
Wow.
We are the cells of the body of Christ.
It's a bit scientific.
Oh, absolutely. We're a cell. Not to be confused with a sleeper cell.
Well, I was thinking about like terrorism and cells.
That's what I mean.
Is that what sleeper cell is?
Yeah.
I was just like, it sounds like, okay, go on.
They're like groups of people who just lay dormant in a society, and then someone, I guess, dings a bell and goes,
get up
to action, you sleeper cell. And then they wake up and they stop doing crazy shit in whatever society they're in. But so we had our cells, and they were gender separate. So men had their house fellowships and women had theirs. And my mum was a leader of one of those house fellowships. And so every Sunday we had women, and of course their children came with them because the men didn't take the kids.
Of course.
And we'd all meet in our house. It could be anywhere from like 5 people to 15. If it grew too big, then it would split off and somebody else would take over.
Okay.
Because it's a cell. See? And I remember I used to love those house fellowships because unlike the church, which was top down, hierarchical, men at the top, men as the head of the household or whatever it was, there it was just women and children.
Yeah.
And it was led by women. Okay. And they made the rules, and they ran, and they decided how things went and what songs we sung. And, it was very nurturing because there would be food. Because, at the end of the fellowship,
So
someone would go to
make
the kitchen.
Food. They weren't doing weaponized incompetence.
that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And it was just, it had a different energy. And I could always feel the difference when a man came into the space. Because sometimes one of the guys might come to drop off a bunch of leaflets because the next week we're going evangelizing. So here's your bunch of tracks so you can distribute it amongst yourself and so on and so forth. And when he stepped into the room, the energy just felt different. I can't explain it. It's just a different energy. And then you kind of just wanted him to go so we could get back to our little thing in our little women's house fellowship. So that's one of experience of it. I think AiAi Studios is a woman-led business, our media production company.
100%.
I feel it. I think of it as a matriarchy.
Oh wow. Okay. I mean,
not a gynarchy.
Yeah.
Because we're not trying to brutalize.
Because we have power and authority.
We have power and authority and we run it, but it is in a patriarchal context.
There we go. So that's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
Or is it...
No. I mean, this is the point. There's no clear-cut answer to this.
Yeah.
It's contested, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you were talking about the church just now, I was like, well, it may have felt, matrifocal for the moments you were there with the women in the church and everything was being organized around them and kinship and ties and community or whatever. But it still existed where men would come and deliver the things, and you had a direct comparator of a very patriarchal church, which you've talked about many times on this podcast.
And they could dismantle those women's fellowships like that. If they didn't like what was going on there, that thing is being disbanded immediately.
Did that happen ever?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the head of the church is still a man.
Yeah.
And if anything is reported that something's going on that he doesn't like or things are being said, and also the men set what is taught, because we had this book, I've forgotten what it was. It's like Daily Scriptures or whatever. That's written by a man for us to learn from and discuss in our women's fellowship.
Wow.
So...
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like this is why people say a matriarchy doesn't exist. Because even come back to AiAi Studios, we've created an organization which you could say in a bunch of ways is matrifocal. I think you could probably look at some of the ways we do our production timeline, and we are meeting the targets of industries and commissioners that don't sit there thinking, is this timeline humane for women doing care work and raising children? Or do you know what I mean? Some of our production timelines, I'm not sure. I think they are shaped by patriarchal systems. We can only call it matrifocal, definitely not matriarchal, because our work, most of our commissions or many of our commissions come from male-dominated industries or decision makers. There's also a racialized dynamic to that. Black women have been more likely to trust me with bigger commissions in my life than other people.
Yep.
So that is something that happens when power and authority shifts.
There's
a decision-making thing that happens. So what kind of stories are we allowed to tell that we don't even have to fight for legitimacy for? There's all sorts of things that have happened in that working relationship where in another context we'd be fighting to say this is important, there's an audience for this. It's not even questioned in that scenario. It just is.
Thinking about everything that we've talked about today and coming back to that opening question, would you want to live in and I'm just going to say blank, because actually at the top of the episode I said matriarchy, but actually there's like 5 terms there, right? So would you want to live in blank, one of those 5 things, and which one and why?
Well, this is very interesting because I'm not going to lie, you gave me permission to imagine what it would be like to experience the privilege of a matriarchal society, and it'd be nice in some ways. I don't know exactly how to imagine it, but it would be nice.
As long as it's not Thatcher.
Yeah, oh, no. That I don't consider that. Okay, so let's go back to, let me now get to my real answer.
Okay.
Is that I would much prefer to live in a matrifocal or matristic society.
Okay.
Where the lives of women are also centered in the way that things run, the structures, the organizations, the education. It's embedded,
from the ground up.
right? That takes women's issues seriously enough to center them, makes them a focus in the way that men's have been, just to, if nothing else, to rebalance things, right? And in terms of a matristic society, I see it as the same way. This is very much about what values are governing society that go beyond domination. Like, how do we create systems of cooperation? How do we create systems of care? How do we allow them to hold space in the rest of it? I mean, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I know that we haven't been centered enough in the systems that we all live inside as women. And I think there is so much scope to do that, and to do that in a way that centers or benefits everyone. Like, that would be my answer.
Okay.
What about you? You can be like, I want to be in the matriarchy and I want to lead it. I am the leader.
What are you trying to say?
We all know how you love power.
Oh my God, that's making me out to be some crazy, crazy person.
No, but you know what? You've always had a strong... You actually like leading. You actually like leading and being in charge of things, actually.
Do you
think? Would say. Don't you think?
No, I think I just enjoy, doing my own thing. I don't want someone else to control me and tell me what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. It's why I've never wanted a 9-to-5 or wanted to work in someone's company, because mostly I don't want you telling me what to do. I just want to do my own thing.
Okay, I understand that, and I can relate to that.
Yes.
However, I do think there is something distinctive about you relative to me, which is that you're the kind of person is, as soon as a project comes in, you're like, right, where's my team? I'm going to get my team. And you're,
'cause you need a team.
Yeah, exactly. But you really take to that like a duck to water. And I don't know if that's just your natural personality or that was nurtured in church through coming up through different church leadership things.
Seeing my mum lead.
Seeing your mum lead, seeing decisions. Examples of it. You are naturally good at it. Do I think you embody matriarchy? No, I think you're actually really good at facilitating leadership. I've heard you on many calls with people in the team where you kind of guide and teach. I think your teacher energy comes out where a person can feel like they're in a conversation with you, but you're passing on knowledge. I experience it myself with you in our relationship. So when I say the in charge thing, I'm kind of joking, because I don't think you embody a version of this that's about dominance. But that said, I've seen men challenge your authority.
Yeah.
And I've seen you hire men
absolutely.
who are very uncomfortable
Yep.
with you being in a position of authority, and a whole bunch of stuff plays out. And I've also seen you say, I know with this one I need to pull rank.
Absolutely.
Because if I don't, that's the only language they understand.
Yep.
So coming back to this Thatcher thing where you have to embody a certain thing.
You shall not pass.
I've seen you do it. Have you not done it?
Yeah, I have. I've had to, and I don't really have a problem doing it.
Precisely.
Funnily enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting.
But I think it's really important because it's about responsibly wielding power. And unfortunately, we've lived in a world where men aren't used to women, maybe especially a black woman in charge, and a black woman in charge who's as competent as you are technically on some of the things you do. You work in a quite male,
absolutely,
like the tech part of your industry is male dominated.
Yes.
So sometimes you have to show them in a language they understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
I'm taking your story, but I'm just saying what I've heard you say.
I think it's good to hear your perspective on that. And I think I largely agree with most of it. I would say that I'm an introvert and I mostly just want to be left alone. But if I am going to be in a situation where I have to work with people, and I do love working with people, don't get it twisted, then I'd rather be in a position where I can shape the thing as opposed to somebody coming in and telling me what I've got to do. Oh God, this is so bad.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I would be, if you were, okay, let me give another one.
Okay, go on.
If there was a matriarchy and that's all we were given it and you were at the top of it, I would be in your matriarchal army. I'd be part of your community. Okay. I think there's a risk you could be positively horrifying because I know you know the cult playbook. And I feel like all you would need to do is just to decide, fuck it, I want to wield power in a very nefarious way, and you would know exactly what to do. But I do think you wield power very responsibly. I mean, I would respect your leadership.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Can I allowed in?
You're the queen of the ting.
Thanks.
There we go. But I think I would want to live, I wouldn't mind living in a matriarchy, actually, interestingly
Would you live
enough.
in my matriarchy?
As long as I am
in charge. I just wanted it on the record because I knew what you would say. I knew you are. You're already like, you lead a matriarchy.
No, I'm not like that. I think you'd lead very well, actually. I think it would be very meticulous, your matriarchy. I think it would be very well researched. We might not make decisions as quickly as we need to. Because
I'd be poring over the academic literature.
You'd be looking at all the literature and all the data and the quant and the qual and the this and the that. And you might get very impatient with some of your subjects.
Oh, I would, definitely.
And then, that could cause some consternation amongst the people them.
Listen. Yeah.
So you have to make sure you balance it with who's around you. Just to
Meaning
really
you.
manage.
Meaning you should really be the leader. Listen, I'm just going to say I should never lead a matriarchy. It wouldn't be good. But I could be a good right-hand person or somewhere in the cabinet, I think. Yeah. I think I could be in the cabinet.
For me, I'd probably just get tired at certain points. I'd be like, guys, I'm done. Like, I don't know what it is you need from me right now, but you need to figure it the fuck out. I'm off. And when I come back, please come with some solutions.
That's the thing. You see, you would say come back with solutions, whereas I'd think I had to be in everything and read every piece of literature. You'd just be like, I have minions. Let me rest. I am an introvert. I am an introvert.
Yeah. I think, I don't think I'd mind a matriarchy. I would love for us to be centered, honestly, at all levels of society. I think ultimately what I want is a world in which there's balance. I think I just like balance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I don't think I'd want a world where there were no men. As someone who has great friendships with men, I think, what have I said before? 90% of my friendships are male.
Yep.
I enjoy their company. I love competing with them, performing.
There's a whole group of men. Andrew Tate, would he be a friend?
No way. I'm talking about the men I like, the men in my orbit. The men I attract are actually very good, decent, great men. And I really enjoy their company. And I think a world without them in it would be poorer, if I'm being honest. I quite enjoy the testosterone to
This is reminding me of that Instagram reel we watched recently.
Oh my God, yes.
Where somebody went round asking a bunch of women, would you live in a world that had only your gender, right?
Sex, yeah.
Women who were asked were like, absolutely, I would live in a world with just women. If there were no men on the planet, it wouldn't bother me. And then they went and asked men the
In
same
fact, they
thing.
were positively happy.
Yeah. They
that
looked
prospect.
filled with jubilation
Yeah.
and ceremony at the prospect. And then they asked men, would you live in a world with just men? And they were like, hell no. That would be awful. And you know, the funny thing about it was, it didn't seem like from the men, the answer was a purely sexualized pushback. One answer maybe seemed like, oh no, I'm not I'm not gay, like slightly homophobic or sexualized in orientation. Most of them, it seemed like that would be awful. Like they were genuinely
because they
thinking
know
about the prospect. And I've got to say, I mean, of course I have wonderful men in my life, but I could quite easily, there are, now that I'm in a relationship with you, and my current circles and most of my friendships are with women and a lot of queer women as well. Yeah. I could very easily live a life without men. I have no problem saying it. I'm not saying that to denigrate men, but I've not got to the point at any point where I feel like I'm protected from a lot of bullshit, even from the nice, wonderful men that I know a lot of the time. And I know that's an awful thing to say.
I know what you mean. It's interesting. And I get where you're coming from on that. And I think a lot of the women that I've known would say the same thing. It's a tricky one.
It's a different question to, would I want a world without them? No. I mean, I have great male friends and wonderful people and collaborators. Yeah. But would my life run smoothly and would I cut out a lot of stuff? Yeah. If men weren't around? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I don't think mine would.
Your life would run smoothly, or it wouldn't run smoothly?
I don't think it would run entirely smoothly without the men in my life.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense then.
Because everything I do is kind of male dominated. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm an audio engineer. I think a lot of the things that I use are made by men and invented by men, maintained by men. A lot of the people I work with are men. I'm not saying there isn't the female equivalent.
If there were women there doing that kind of work instead.
Oh, then it'd be fine. Yeah, then it'd be fine. Yeah. 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 It would be fine. But in the world we live in right now, it's still very male dominated. So I would need those men in my life. But also, I do quite enjoy the company of my male friends.
That's true.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to not have my male friends.
I hear that. Yeah, I mean, like some of my favorite collaborators that I work with are men, and I adore working with them. And I think they're very, very thoughtful about gender dynamics. I still think sometimes they play out in our work massively. Yeah. So, but nonetheless, I think they're very, very thoughtful. They're great people, great capabilities. I still would love to work in a world where there were women I could collaborate with that had their same skill sets. And I think the only reason I've not seen that to the same extent is because of the way people have been socialized to say, oh, this kind of work, let's say research or like strongly statistical quant-based stuff, is more given to men as an option. Yeah. Right.
And it's the stuff that's most funded and the most revered. And
I'd like to know what would happen if I was collaborating with more women that had that skill set, because I believe would read the numbers and interpret things differently.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I'd love to see that in my industry. You know, like a film set that's just entirely women, you know, from the gaffer to the DOP to the sound person to the producer, the director, you know, I mean, just the whole thing. I think that could be really amazing, actually. And I'd love to see that. But yeah, I'm happy with men being on the periphery and dipping in and out.
I wonder how men will, like our male friends will feel like listening to this. Anyway, it's International Women's Month, so what can we do? Could you live in a world without women? What about men? Tell us your thoughts and everything that you think in the comments or wherever you can find us, on LinkedIn, on social media. What else do we need to tell people?
That they can buy us a coffee. Yeah. So we now have a page set up for you to support the show, either with a monthly subscription or a one-off. And we would really appreciate if you could do that. The link is in the description. If, however, you're not able to do that, don't worry. You still get the same show. Nothing's going behind a paywall. But what we would ask you to do is to share the show with someone you think would really appreciate listening to it. It helps us to be heard by more people and grow our audience. So thank you so much for being with us for this episode of
Rigour Flow.
That's the one.
Indeed. And see you next time.
See you next time.